Welcome back to this episode of the Crush the Rush podcast. We are 500 episodes in and still going strong. So in this special episode, we are looking back at 5 incredible years, 500 incredible conversations, and actionable tips and inspiring stories and lessons learned along the way. So inside this episode, I'm chatting all about how the podcast began, key lessons learned from the last 500 episodes, really highlighting the power of consistency, vulnerability, and community, how you can apply these lessons to your own entrepreneurial journey, and highlights from some of our most impactful episodes and interviews. I can't wait for you to join us. Go ahead and listen, and then make sure you grab the Spotify playlist in the show notes so that you can listen to all of our amazing episodes in a special celebratory list of all of our favorite guests. We made it 5 years later, 500 episodes of amazing conversations, so many tips and tricks and empowering strategies, all to help crush the rush, which is an idea that I had in the shower when I was getting ready for work one day. And, as I'm recording this, I feel like I put so much pressure on myself to come up with the right topic for the 500th episode, because I feel like we've talked about a lot on this podcast. And I think it's so fitting that I am recording this a couple of days after Christmas. My girls are downstairs having a play date. My stepdaughter and her husband are here. Everyone's in the house. And I'm like, hey, I'm just going to go do this really quick because that's how this podcast has worked. Like, it's just something that has completely fit into our life. It's not always fancy, but it is really, really consistent. And so I always joke that when I talk about being a business and marketing strategist, that I never thought in a million years that our company would be named Crush the Rush. I honestly think about changing the name quite a bit because I'm like, wait, is this really what I want to be known for? But it grew from such a grassroots movement and has become so much more than I ever imagined that I'm like, well, we're just kind of stuck with it. So I've never had anyone do any sort of formal branding for this podcast aside from the logo. And here we are recording the episode in the middle of a play date, and we're just going to go with it. So I thought it would be fun on this celebratory episode to share the story of how the podcast got started, but also some things that I've learned along the way and like a little bit of a recap. And we've got some fun surprises packed in here. So I think my biggest message, though, is, and I know you hear it all the time, but consistency is so, so, so powerful. This podcast has become the little engine that could, because we've never missed an episode ever. And there have been a lot of things that have happened. And, of course, we publish sometimes at the wrong time, or the titles are spelled wrong, or it's released on the wrong day. But every single week for the last 5 years, we have had at least one new episode. And that is something that I'm really, really proud of. And I can't really even grasp my mind around what that means. But over the past 500 episodes, we've tackled some really incredible topics. And so I thought it would be cool to talk about some of my favorites, some things that happened. And we created this really amazing Spotify playlist for you with all of the episodes that I'm going to reference in this episode. We do love podcasting around here. But to start out, we've explored a lot about the power of mindset shifts, because I feel like when you talk about strategy and you talk about making changes in that life priorities-based business, that you have to be in the right mindset. And so our most popular guest in this category was my friend Simi Bodick. And she talks about honoring your mind and your body really, truly in episode 207. And I think this is so cool because she is one of my good friends and we do collaborate a lot. And I just love that you guys love her as much as I love her. And so we really dig into discovering how to overcome limiting beliefs and that growth mindset and things that you talk about. But we also talk a lot about the art of building a strong foundation for your business, which honestly I think is where this whole podcast stems from, right? So it's all about really knowing your messaging, your ideal client, and then crafting those compelling offers. And one of our most popular episodes about crafting compelling offers was from my friend Colleen Nichols. You might have heard of her. She is the founder and author of the No Shame Sales Game. And she comes in with the top episode here talking about how her membership is really, truly the foundation of her business. And that was in episode 213. So just to kick things off, those are some really powerful lessons and some really amazing women that have come into our world. A other thing that we talk about on this podcast very frequently is the importance of work-life integration. Notice that we don't use balance, but your favorite episode on this topic is How Are You Really with Jenna Kutcher? And yes, we have a story about this one, so stay tuned. But this is episode 231 and is the power of prioritizing self-care and reminding ourselves that success isn't just about achieving your goals, but also about enjoying the journey, which is where the next amazing guests come from. And that is my good friend, Julie Boris. You love, like when I say love, like a lot of you have downloaded this episode, the daily habits to crush your goals and micro habits that you can use. And so this is episode 203. And so it's just really been cool to see sort of like all of my friends come up as some of the top episodes in the last couple of years. But also, we have explored and celebrated the magic of community and the power of connecting with other entrepreneurs and really learning from each other and offering support along the way. And the most popular episode in this category is episode 222, and it is the power of in-person masterminds. And so I share my story about how I got started and then how we really built our mastermind and then leaned into creating our co-op, which exists today. Other topics that we've covered over the last 5 years is mastering social media, mastering things without social media, leveraging content marketing, scaling, and building a team. Building a team has been really important lately. And so this all came from episode 198, which is where we cover our CEO Week strategy. It is our most popular episode, our most popular training, and it's how to build a business in 8 hours a week. And don't worry, I put all of this in the Spotify playlist so you can go back and listen to it. But the cool thing that has happened with all of these amazing guests is we've had the privilege of interviewing some really amazing women and entrepreneurs, from renowned coaches and consultants and innovative founders, everyone from Amy Porterfield to Jenna Kutcher to Ebony Trucks to Gemma Bonham Carter and Ellen Yin. Those are some of my favorites. And I think the most favorite experience has been an entire library of amazing case studies with you. And so when I think about celebrating the 500th episode and all of the amazing guests that we have, honestly, the best part of this podcast is you, because I have been able to showcase you and what you've done and what you love and how you've been able to implement our Crush the Rush strategy. And we have now over 200 episodes of stories about your case studies. And so to me, that is just so, so, so special. So looking back on these episodes, not only have we had some amazing women come in and a couple of men talk about what they are doing and how they are making an impact, but I've personally been able to learn so much, but not just about business, but about the women of this community. And I wanted to sort of dig into some of the lessons that I have learned along the way so that you can pay attention to these too. These are like some key themes that I've found over the last 500 episodes. The first one is, you're not going to be surprised, and that is the crucial role of consistency. So how can you apply this to your business? Well, you've heard me say it before, but schedule consistent time for content creation. Even if it's just 15 minutes a day, like commit to that one thing that you're going to do consistently. Because that one thing, that one podcast episode has turned into this like epic community that I never even imagined. But the reason is I haven't missed a week. And so if you don't love that one thing, you're not going to be consistent. It's just too hard. And so consistency builds momentum, but also helps you stay top of mind with your audience. So consistency and content are always the number one topics on this podcast. And we've had over 100 episodes on this topic alone. So I hope you take away that consistency for yourself and your business, whether it's creating content or engaging with your audience or taking time for yourself, creating that white space that we talk about all the time, is the like one habit of action that you should take, right? That consistency of doing that one thing is the habit that you should be forming right now. So again, if you're listening and you're like, well, this is really inspiring, schedule that weekly or monthly content creation session, right? Set up time for things that you love, those creative sessions. And, one of the tips that I gave quite frequently over the last couple of years is to change up your location. Go find a space to be creative, commit to showing up to in-person things and have real life conversations. You never know where those conversations are going to take you. And if you can do that consistently, I promise you that you're going to see some momentum. So that's number one. Number two is the power of vulnerability. So really thinking about sharing behind the scenes, not just like the copy and paste stuff that most, business coaches or strategists share, but sharing your authentic self, your struggles, your doubts, because those are the episodes that have done the best. And I think when we connect with our audience on a deeper level, it really has built this community. But my challenges. I talk about going to therapy. I talk about doing podcast episodes that are really important, like this one, when my kids are having a play date. I talk about the challenges that we've had growing and scaling and building a team and things that have worked and things that haven't worked. And I feel like the reason why the podcast has done so well is because I have been so open about not knowing everything and creating a safe space to grow and learn together. So if you're listening and you're like, okay, well, how do I apply this to my business? Like, share your challenges, share your wins, share behind the scenes, the glimpses into your journey, and really be open and honest about your struggles. How have you overcome them? And this is just going to help you connect with your audience on a deeper level. Every single time a client tells me they are stuck, I will first tell you to unplug, but then I will say, go deeper, share behind the scenes, open yourself up. We don't want perfection. We want real life. And the most popular episodes are the ones where I share that. And our listeners, I think you really enjoy that. And you can hear that in our guests' voices as they share what they've done and how they've done it. And that's what has really resonated. The other thing that I will share that has been a really key theme is the resilience, if you will say, of the entrepreneurial spirit, right? So the journey is rarely a straight line. There are a lot of setbacks and there are a lot of doubts and there's a lot of moments when you want to give up. I assure you, every 10 episodes, I'm like, oh my God, I have nothing to say. What do I say? How am I going to think of something to share for this like epic 500th episode? I procrastinated writing this for a really long time, but I feel like it's the moments where I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to share. I'm just going to share the journey. That's when I really see things click, right? So it's the moments where you discover like you can just be you and learning that you can adapt to change, you can move forward, and it's really about one step at a time. So when you're faced with challenges, because we all will be in this season, just remember that you're not alone and go into that. It's going to help you to share what you're going through. The other thing that I have talked about so much when I was doing research on this episode is B- is passing. I say this all the time. You do not have to chase perfection. One of my favorite memories of this podcast to date is obviously interviewing Jenna Kutcher for reasons that I don't have to explain. She's a really awesome entrepreneur that I look up to. And even though this was 2 years ago, at the time of the interview, I was fresh into working full-time for myself. I think I was maybe 2 months in. To say that I was nervous was an understatement. We had 30 minutes. There were very specific rules we had to follow. I could only ask certain questions, and we were working on promoting her book, which was great. I love the book. But honestly, I just wanted to chat. I was like, there's so many things that I want to ask. Except the day that we had the interview, I woke up with bronchitis. So in the middle of the interview, and I share this in the introduction because you can hear it in my voice, I coughed so hard, I cried. Like I had to put Jenna on mute so that I could hack up a lung, get myself together, and then continue on in my 30-minute window on camera, right? So I share that because it's a great interview. I had a great experience. It was very real life. And it was such a huge lesson for me that of course, I wish it was better and it could be rescheduled, but it worked. And we made it work. She was very nice about it. And it's a really proud moment for me on this podcast, but to also show that you don't have to be perfect. And then finally, the last takeaway is, and probably one of the more important ones, is the importance of community and the power of community on this journey. So this podcast would not be what it is today without all of you. And I really tried to lean into that. And so it's like the support, the encouragement, the shared experiences, they've just been so invaluable in this part of the journey. And I say this all the time, but like, don't forget about connecting. Don't forget to connect with other people in your industry. Join online communities, attend networking events. And even if you are an introvert, which I actually am, make time for it because it works, and offer to support and help other women in your business. If you don't share what you do, how are others going to know? And so at the end of every single interview on this show, I always ask, how can I help you? How can I support you? How can I better support you? So if you're counting, because I do 2 episodes a week, one an interview, one myself, that's over 250 how can I help you questions, which then has led to amazing partnerships, clients, relationships, and friends. And so I thought it would be cool to share a story about how this has worked. And that is with my friend Victoria from Brandwell Designs. She was on episode 379 talking about the perception of branding and why it is important. It's a great episode, but she pitched herself to be on the podcast, and I was immediately hooked on how she ran her website design company. She runs an all-female team. She's a mom of 2 sweet little girls, and we've stayed in touch because I asked, how could I help her? And she asked, how could she help me? And eventually I went and spoke inside her community, which then turned into a course, which is really cool to see come to life. I then became an affiliate for her launch because I believe in her messaging and her marketing messaging so much. Now it's an evergreen course, and our anti-social school module sits inside of it. So if you join Brandwell Designs in their marketing course, you actually get a piece of anti-social school, which is so cool. And it all came from one question: how can I help, right? But here's the craziest part of this story. So yes, I asked the question and it turned into this really amazing partnership. But every year in January, I create a vision board of sorts, and I pull photos from like Pinterest and all these kind of things. And so a photo that I pulled was from Pinterest. It was Victoria and her team working, and I just loved like the vibe. And I was like, oh, I want to do this for our co-op retreat. I didn't know it was Victoria. But after further investigation and talking about her epic photo shoots that she does, I was like, Victoria, I think you're on my vision board. It was actually her team that I had put on my vision board before we were even connected. And then all of this happened, right? So cool. So I share that because what started as a podcast interview actually started well before that, apparently, because I had this vision of working with her, even though I didn't know it. We've had multiple co-op members join from her community and vice versa, and it just created this amazing partnership. And so I wanted to share that story because I think you can see, through the Jenna Kutcher interview and Powering Through, and through this power of community, it's consistency and it's community and it's sharing behind the scenes. It's being really raw and organic. And so as we wrap up this 500th episode reflection, I have recorded everywhere from our kitchen. We hosted a full retreat and did a live podcast episode, which was episode 259, to recording in our basement during the pandemic while my husband was homeschooling our girls in kindergarten. That was our first episode. When we launched the podcast, I would post in Facebook groups, hoping that I would find the right guests and that they were a good fit. And now we are booked out like 6 months in advance with a really fancy application process. Fancy meaning we have a system, because the podcast really has this like ecosystem of a community all on its own. I've hosted with bronchitis, with the power going off, with a client having a legit like tornado warning, and with amazing women all over the world, like South Africa, Bermuda, Mexico, Canada, the UK, Australia. Like, it's so crazy to me that we have turned this podcast into a profitable business model by using it to help build relationships. And now running a business that has consistently grown over the past 5 years, hitting 7 figures, because this is the foundation. So if you're listening, what is your foundation? What are you consistent with? And how are you building a community around that? This foundation has lasted through a pandemic, a financial crisis, elections, whatever the heck we're calling 2024, and whatever happens in the next 500 episodes. And I think what makes me most proud is it all came from one idea, right? How can we share more about getting out of the everyday rush and doing more about what you love? Our messaging has changed a little bit over the years, but that's still the crux. That's still the one thing that we are so focused on. And so I hope these stories empower you to follow through with your ideas, be consistent, build a community around it, and know that when you do, they're going to be so much bigger than you ever imagined because you're going to stick to it. But here's the fun part. We are not stopping here. We have so many exciting things planned for the Crush the Rush podcast. We're going to continue to dive deeper into our most requested topics: the future of work, AI, the evolving landscape of entrepreneurship, how we are continuing to push that life priorities first business model and give you even more time to do what you love, really focusing on building that sustainable business, that strategy for aligning your business and aligning it with the values and supporting your well-being. And then the power of personal development, right? I love to bring in guests that cultivate that growth mindset, that building that self-confidence and overcoming those limiting beliefs. So we have some amazing guests coming who are making waves in the industry. Plus, we'll continue to share behind the scenes. I would love for you to go take a listen to our top episodes over the last 5 years. We'll go ahead and put the Spotify playlist in the show notes and you can revisit them and all the stories along the way. I just want to, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening. Thank you for making this idea in the shower come to life. Thank you for being patient with us as we learn and grow and share behind the scenes. And I can't wait to see what the next 500 episodes bring. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And I'd love it if you have a favorite episode to share it and tag me on it, and we'll have a 500th episode celebration.